He thought he had everything, until a call in the middle of paradise turned his life upside down. What he did next, no one expected. If you like stories like this, be sure to subscribe to this channel. We post every day, continuing. The businessman, Raphael Blackwood, observed the panoramic view of London from the 30th floor of the corporate building that bore his name. At 38 years old, he had built an empire in the real estate market that stretched across the United Kingdom, and was beginning to conquer territory in Europe. Each of his decisions moved millions. Each investment redefined urban horizons. Each word in board meetings echoed in rooms across Western Europe. But on that March afternoon, as he watched the chaotic traffic below and felt the cold air conditioning against his skin, Raphael experienced a strange sensation: emptiness. It wasn't new. The emptiness had accompanied him for 5 years, ever since Marianne Southern had left his life, taking with her the only moments of human warmth he could remember. Marianne Southern, a nurse in the pediatric ward of St. Jude's Hospital, with brown hair always tied back practically, honey-colored eyes that saw kindness where everyone else saw only numbers and results. For 5 years, she had tried to touch the layers of ice that protected Raphael's heart. For 5 years he resisted, convinced that feelings were obstacles to success. His secretary knocked on the door, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Blackwood, you have a video conference with the French investors in 10 minutes. "I'll be right there, Felicity." Raphael adjusted his Italian tie, checked that his black hair was perfectly aligned, and walked towards the meeting room. His steps echoed on the imported marble, each sound a confirmation of his power, his position, of everything he had achieved, since he decided to definitively bury any trace of vulnerability. The meeting proceeded as always. Numbers, projections, strategies. Raphael commanded every word, anticipated every objection, manipulated every silence. At the end of 2 hours, he had closed a $50 million investment for a residential complex in Paris. Another victory, another number in the bank account, another confirmation that being always in control was the only way not to be hurt. When everyone left, Raphael remained alone in the room, observing the presentation still projected on the wall, ascending graphs, impressive figures, optimistic projections. This was what his life had become, a sequence of cold data that impressed the world but did not warm an inch of his soul. He remembered Marianne again. It was inevitable. Whenever silence took over, whenever there was no more negotiation to command or decision to make, she returned. Not as a sweet memory, but as a wound that insisted on throbbing. 5 years earlier, she had entered his life unexpectedly. Raphael was at St. Jude's Hospital visiting the son of an employee who had suffered an accident. It was a protocol visit, part of his responsibilities as an employer, nothing more. But when he entered the pediatric ward and saw that woman talking to a child in a bed, something in her posture caught his attention. Marianne held the hand of a girl of about 6, speaking softly, smiling with infinite patience as she explained how the IV worked. It wasn't just professionalism. It was genuine care, a real concern for the well-being of that unknown child. Raphael, accustomed to relationships based on mutual interest and strategic advantages, initially couldn't comprehend that gratuitous display of affection. They met that day. Marianne treated him with the same kindness she dedicated to her young patients, unimpressed by his expensive suit or imposing demeanor. To her, he was just another visitor, another person who needed guidance on hospital hours and procedures. "The little boy is fine," she said at that first meeting. "The surgery was a success. He should be discharged in 3 days. Thank you for the information." Raphael had responded automatically, professionally. He asked about you, said his boss would visit him. I think he was impressed. Marianne smiled. Children are like that. When someone they admire shows care, they feel very special. It was a simple, casual comment, but there was something in the way she spoke about showing care that touched a part of Raphael he thought was definitively anesthetized. On the way back to the office, he couldn't stop thinking about those words. 2 weeks later, he found an excuse to return to the hospital, then another and another. Until he no longer needed excuses, He was visiting Marianne because he wanted to be near her, because she represented something he couldn't define, but that was good for his parched soul. Their courtship began hesitantly. Raphael didn't know how to relate outside the controlled environment of business. Marianne, in turn, realized early on that she was dealing with a complex man, wounded by experiences he preferred not to share. But there was something in his gaze, especially when he thought no one was watching, that revealed a depth and vulnerability he tried so hard to hide. "Why did you choose to work with children?" Raphael asked during one of their first dinners together. "Because they are pure truth," Marianne replied. "They don't know how to lie about what they feel. When they're scared, they show it. When they're happy, they radiate joy. When they need affection, they ask without shame. It's a more honest world." "Do you think adults should be like that too?" "I think it would be a better world if they were." Raphael smiled, but it was a sad smile. He had learned exactly the opposite. He learned that showing needs was giving weapons to the enemy. He learned that expressing feelings was putting himself in a position of weakness. He learned that the adult world was a gladiatorial arena where only the coldest survived. Raphael's childhood had been intensive training for this coldness. An only child of entrepreneurial parents, he grew up amidst constant demands, impossible expectations, and an emotional absence that was filled with material achievements. His father, Henry Blackwood, was a man who measured love by results: high grades in school, victories in competitions, successes in any area were the only ways to receive approval. "A man doesn't cry," his father repeated whenever Raphael showed any fragility. "A man solves problems, he doesn't complain about them." His mother, Eleanor, was an elegant and distant woman who had outsourced motherhood to nannies and governesses. Displays of affection were rare and conditional. Raphael learned very early that to be loved he had to be perfect, and perfection in the Blackwood world meant financial success and absolute emotional control. At 18, when he entered business administration college, Raphael was already a young version of the man he would become: determined, focused, incapable of true intimacy. Relationships were transactions, friendships were networks of contacts, and love was a word he avoided pronouncing because he didn't understand its true meaning. Marianne was the first person who managed to break through these defenses, not aggressively or strategically, but with patience, with constant presence, with an infinite capacity to see beyond the armor he wore every day. During their 5 years of relationship, she tried to build bridges between his world and a universe of emotional possibilities that Raphael didn't even know existed. She took him to meet her family in Manchester, simple, affectionate people who embraced without ceremony and shared stories without ulterior motives. She introduced him to her work, where he could observe how genuine care transformed lives. "Have you ever thought about having children?" she asked during a walk in Hyde Park, 2 years after they started their relationship. The question caught Raphael off guard. "I don't know if I'd be a good father." "Why not?" "Because I didn't. Have an example." "But you can create a new example. You can be different from what your parents were." Raphael had considered the possibility, but always theoretically, distantly. The idea of being responsible for shaping a small, defenseless life terrified him. How could he teach love to a child when he himself wasn't sure what that word meant? Years passed, and Marianne kept trying. She tried to show him that financial success without human connection was an empty victory. She tried to demonstrate that vulnerability was not weakness but courage. She tried to convince him that he deserved to be loved for who he was, not just for what he achieved. Raphael resisted, not out of malice but out of incapacity. It was as if they spoke different languages. When she asked for more emotional presence, he offered expensive gifts. When she desired intimate conversations, he recounted professional achievements. When she suggested romantic trips, he took her to corporate events in exotic destinations. The relationship slowly deteriorated, like a building gradually losing its foundations. Marianne continued to love the man she saw behind the mask, but she was exhausted from fighting alone for a connection that he seemed incapable of offering. The last attempt happened during a weekend in the Lake District. Marianne had planned 2 days just for them, away from phones and meetings, in a cozy inn where she hoped they could finally talk honestly. "Raphael," she said on the first night as they stood by the fireplace, "I need you to tell me what you feel." "What do you mean?" "Tell me what you feel for me, in simple, honest words, without beating around the bush." Raphael remained silent for long minutes. He knew that moment was decisive, that Marianne was offering him one last opportunity to truly connect, but the words wouldn't come, or rather they came but seemed stuck somewhere between his heart and his throat. You know you're important to me." "Important how? Like an efficient secretary? Like a profitable investment? Like a piece that fits well into your organized life?" "Marianne, you're being unfair." "I'm being desperate." She stood up, walking to the window. 5 years, Raphael. 5 years trying to find a chink in your armor. 5 years waiting for you to truly let me in. You're already in. No, I'm not. I'm in the living room of your life. You allow me to see some rooms, but never the basement where you keep your fears, nor the attic where you hide your dreams. It was a perfect metaphor, and Raphael knew it. Marianne always had a knack for translating complex feelings into images he could understand. But understanding and acting were two completely different things. They returned to London on Sunday morning, in silence. Raphael tried to resume the conversation a few times the following week, but always ended up returning to the safe ground of practical matters, and Marianne, with each frustrated attempt, moved a little further away. 3 weeks later, she appeared at his apartment with an expression he had never seen before. There was determination, but also sadness. There was relief, but also despair. "I need to tell you something," she said, without even sitting down. "What is it?" Raphael was preparing a financial report, but dropped everything when he noticed her tone. "I'm pregnant." The world stopped. Raphael felt as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. Pregnant. Marianne was pregnant. They were going to have a child. His first reaction was neither joy nor fear. It was total paralysis. Raphael simply couldn't process the information. A child. A small, dependent human being who would need him to survive, to learn about the world, to understand what love is. "How long have you known?" he asked finally. 3 days. "I took the test on Monday." "And what are we going to do?" It was the wrong question. Raphael realized it the moment the words left his mouth. Marianne wasn't there to discuss strategic options. She was there expecting a human reaction, a demonstration that this news meant something special to him. "I'm going to have this baby," she said. "The question is whether you'll be present or if you'll keep running away." "I'm not running away." "Yes, you are. You've been running for 5 years, and now you're not just running from me, you're running from your own child." Raphael stood up, walking to the apartment window. Below, London teemed with its usual chaotic energy. Millions of people living their lives, facing their challenges, building their families. Why was it so difficult for him? "I don't know if I can be a father, Marianne." "Why not?" "Because I don't know how to love." She approached, touching his arm. "Yes, you do. You're just afraid to admit it." "What if I'm like my father? What if I turn our child into the same kind of person I became?" "You won't. Because you're aware of the problem. Because you can choose to be different." Raphael wanted to believe her. He wanted to imagine that it was possible to break the cycle of emotional coldness that had marked the Blackwood family for generations. But fear was stronger than hope. "I need time to think." "How much time?" "I don't know." Marianne nodded, but Raphael could see the disillusionment in her eyes. She had expected a different reaction. She had hoped that the news of the pregnancy would be the catalyst for the transformation she had been trying to provoke for years. "All right," she said, "but while you think, I'll be living and taking care of our child." She left that night and didn't return. Raphael tried calling several times over the next few days, but she didn't answer. When he finally managed to speak to her, 2 weeks later, Marianne was clear. She had rented an apartment in another neighborhood and intended to go through the pregnancy alone. "When you know," "What you want from life, call me," she said before hanging up. Raphael plunged even deeper into work. It was his only way to deal with the pain and confusion that had taken over his life. He bought companies, closed international partnerships, expanded businesses. In 6 months, he tripled the group's revenue. In a year, he was among the 10 richest men in the country. But at night, when he came home and found the apartment empty and silent, he couldn't help but think of Marianne. Where was she? How was she feeling? Was the baby developing well? Was it a boy or a girl? Sometimes he picked up the phone to call, but always hung up before completing the call. What would he say? That he missed her? That he wanted to come back? That he was ready to be a father? It would be a lie. He wasn't ready. Maybe he never would be. 8 months passed in a blur of meetings, trips, and professional achievements. Raphael convinced himself that he had made the right decision. Marianne deserved someone better, someone capable of true love. The baby would grow up better without a cold and distant father like him. It was then that he decided to take a vacation in Nice, France. He needed distance, perspective, a few days without thinking about business or life-changing decisions. The resort was a perfect refuge, luxurious, isolated, frequented by people who understood the need for absolute privacy. Raphael spent 3 days relaxing for the first time in months. He swam in the infinity pool that blended with the Mediterranean horizon, read books that had nothing to do with economics or administration, tasted wines that didn't cost a fortune, but had honest and direct flavors. It was a sunny Thursday afternoon when his phone rang. Raphael hesitated before answering. He had promised himself he wouldn't think about work that week, but when he saw that the number was from London and he didn't recognize it, he decided to accept the call. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Dr. Paul Harrison from St. Jude's Hospital." Raphael's heart pounded. St. Jude's Hospital. That's where Marianne worked. That's where she had probably chosen to have the baby. "Yes, doctor." "Sir, I need to inform you that Mrs. Marianne Southern has gone into premature labor. The baby is being born at 32 weeks. Raphael felt the world spin. Premature. The baby was being born early. "How is she?" "There are complications. There was a hemorrhage during childbirth. She is in surgery right now. And the baby, it's a girl. She's in the neonatal intensive care unit in critical condition." A daughter, he had a daughter, and she was fighting for her life while he relaxed in a resort thousands of miles away. I'm coming back now. Mr. Blackwood, she listed you as an emergency contact. That's why I'm calling. I believe it's important that you come as soon as possible." Raphael hung up the phone and stood still for a few seconds, trying to process the information. Marianne was undergoing emergency surgery. Their daughter was in critical condition, and he was there, 7,000 kilometers away, drinking a mojito while his family fought for survival. Without hesitation, he picked up the phone again and called his private pilot. "I need a flight to London now, as fast as you can manage." "Sir, I can have everything ready in 2 hours." 1 hour, and cancel everything on my schedule for the next 15 days. Raphael packed his bags in 10 minutes, left the resort without saying goodbye to anyone, and went straight to the airport. Throughout the 11-hour flight, he couldn't close his eyes. He thought of Marianne alone in the hospital, facing complications that could cost her life. He thought of the daughter he hadn't yet met, struggling to breathe on some ICU equipment. And for the first time in years, Raphael cried. He cried for the pain he had caused Marianne. He cried for the lost time. He cried for fear of arriving too late. He cried because he finally understood what he had lost when he chose fear instead of love. The plane landed at Heathrow at 6 on Friday morning. Raphael went straight from the airport to the hospital, still in the clothes he wore at the resort, unshaven, with disheveled hair. A version of himself he would never have allowed the world to see. When he arrived at the reception of St. Jude's Hospital, he went straight to the point. "I need to see Marianne Southern and my daughter." The reception nurse directed him to the 5th floor, maternity and neonatal ICU. Raphael had never been to that part of the hospital before. During the years he visited Marianne, he always went straight to the pediatric ward on the 2nd floor. The 5th floor was different, quieter, with an energy that mixed hope and apprehension in an almost palpable way. Dr. Paul Harrison was waiting for him near the elevators. He was a man in his 50s, grey-haired, with a serious but kind expression. Raphael recognized him from the times he had accompanied Marianne to hospital events. "Mr. Blackwood," the doctor greeted him. "It's good you could come so quickly." "How are they?" Raphael went straight to the point without ceremony. "Your daughter is stable at the moment. She was born weighing 1.890 grams, which is a reasonable weight for 32 weeks, but she needs respiratory support and is being monitored 24 hours a day. The next few days will be critical." Raphael felt his legs weaken. His daughter. It was surreal to hear those words applied to him. And Marianne. The surgery was successful. The hemorrhage is controlled, but she lost a lot of blood. She's sedated and should wake up in the next few hours. It was a delicate situation, but we believe both will recover completely. The relief was like a warm wave coursing through Raphael's body. They were alive, hurt, fragile, but alive. "Can I see them?" "You can see the baby through the glass of the neonatal ICU. Marianne is still in recovery, but in a few hours she'll be able to receive visitors." Dr. Paul Harrison led him down a seemingly endless corridor. Raphael had never noticed how hospitals had a specific smell, a mixture of disinfectant, medications, and something indefinable that he now associated with life being preserved at all costs. They stopped in front of a large window overlooking the neonatal ICU. Raphael looked inside and felt the impact like a punch to the stomach. There were several incubators, each containing a tiny baby connected to wires and tubes. Nurses moved silently among the equipment, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat. "She's that one," Dr. Paul Harrison said, pointing to an incubator near the window. Raphael looked and saw his daughter for the first time. She was smaller than anything he could have imagined. Her skin was pink and almost transparent, her eyes were closed, and there was a small tube connected to her nose to help her breathe. Her tiny fists were clenched, as if she were fighting against the world she had found outside her mother's womb. "She's perfect," Raphael murmured, unable to take his eyes off his daughter. "Premature babies are true warriors," the doctor said. "They face challenges that many adults couldn't overcome. Your daughter has already shown she has strength." "Can I go in?" "Not at this moment. Only the medical team and the mother when she is well enough. But you can talk to her through the intercom." Dr. Paul Harrison showed him a small phone next to the window. Raphael picked it up with trembling hands and pressed the button. "Hi, Princess," he said, feeling completely ridiculous and absolutely natural at the same time. "It's me, your dad." He didn't know what else to say. How do you talk to a baby who can barely breathe on her own? How do you express the love he was feeling for someone he had met 5 minutes ago? To his surprise, the little one slightly moved her head towards the window. One of the nurses approached the incubator and gestured to Raphael. "She reacted to your voice," Dr. Paul Harrison said. "Babies recognize voices even before they are born. Although you didn't live together during the pregnancy, there's a genetic connection, a frequency she identifies." Raphael continued to speak softly into the intercom, telling his daughter about the desperate trip from France, about how happy he was to finally meet her, about how he would take care of her from then on. With each word, he felt as if a frozen part of his soul was melting. 2 hours later, he was allowed to see Marianne. She had woken up from sedation and was conscious, though still very weak. Raphael entered the recovery room with his heart pounding. He didn't know how she would react to his presence. Marianne was connected to some equipment, but there was no longer the medical urgency of the first few hours. Her brown hair was spread on the pillow, and she looked pale, but her honey-colored eyes maintained their usual sparkle. When she saw him enter, she showed no surprise. It was as if she knew he would come. "Hi," she said, her voice weak but firm. "Hi." Raphael approached the bed, not knowing whether he should sit, touch her hand, or keep his distance. "How are you feeling?" "Tired. Worried about her. I just saw her. She's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." Marianne smiled for the first time. "She is, isn't she, little warrior?" Dr. Paul Harrison said she reacted to my voice. Babies are wise. They feel things that we adults lose the ability to feel. They were silent for a few minutes. Raphael pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed. There were so many things he wanted to say, so many apologies he wanted to make, so many promises he wanted to offer, but he didn't know where to start. "Marianne," he said finally, "I'm so sorry." "Why?" "For not being here, for letting you go through this alone, for being a coward. You're here now. But I almost arrived too late." Marianne watched him carefully. There was something different about Raphael, something in the way his eyes sparkled when he spoke of their daughter, something in the vulnerability he wasn't trying to hide. For the first time in 5 years, she was seeing the man she always knew existed behind the corporate armor. "How did you find out?" she asked. "Dr. Paul Harrison called me. You put my name as an emergency contact. I knew that if something happened to me, you would do the right thing regarding her." Marianne's trust completely disarmed him. Even after everything that had happened, even after months of abandonment, she still believed he would do the right thing. "What if I don't? What if I mess everything up like I did with you? Then you'll learn and try again. That's what parents do." "I don't know how to be a father, Marianne. No one does. Everyone learns by doing. My parents didn't learn. They just pretended to be parents. You are not your parents." It was the same thing she had said years before, back when they were still together and talking about having children. At the time, Raphael couldn't believe those words. Now, looking at Marianne in the hospital bed, knowing that across the corridor their daughter was fighting for her life, he began to think that perhaps she was right. "What's her name?" Raphael asked. "I haven't registered it yet. I was waiting to see if—" Marianne stopped, unable to complete the sentence. "To see if she would survive?" "Yes, and also, I was waiting for you." "Waiting for me?" "So we could choose together." Raphael felt an intense emotion take over his chest. Marianne had reserved for him the right to participate in choosing their daughter's name. Even after everything, even having every reason to make that decision alone, she had preserved his place as a father. "What were you thinking of?" "Helen. It means bright light." "Helen Blackwood Southern," Raphael said, testing the sound. "It's perfect." "Do you like it?" "I love it. It's a strong, beautiful name. It suits a warrior." They smiled together, and Raphael felt that for the first time in months he was where he should be. The following days established a new routine. Raphael cancelled all appointments and remained at the hospital. He slept in a reclining chair in Marianne's room and spent his hours between visits to the neonatal ICU and conversations with doctors about Helen's condition. Marianne's recovery was progressive but constant. On the 3rd day, she was already able to walk to the ICU to see their daughter. It was emotional for Raphael to observe the first real encounter between mother and baby. Marianne could touch Helen through the incubator's openings, and the little one reacted immediately to the touch, visibly calming down. "She knows you're her mother," Raphael commented. 9 months together. She knows my smell, my voice, my touch. And she'll know mine too." Marianne watched him. "Are you sure about that?" "Absolutely. I won't run away anymore." "Raphael, having a premature baby is very difficult. It will be months of special care, sleepless nights, constant worry. It's not like in the movies." "I know, and I want to be present for all of it." "What about work? Your companies, your investments?" Raphael had thought about this in recent days. His sudden absence had caused some minor business crises, but nothing that couldn't be resolved, and for the first time in his life, he didn't mind not being the person responsible for resolving everything personally. "I'm going to reorganize everything. I'm going to delegate more responsibilities. I'm going to decline projects that require long trips. I'm going to find a balance." "Can you do that?" "I'll learn. Just like I'll learn to be a father." Marianne didn't answer immediately. She wanted to believe him, but there were years of disillusionment that couldn't be erased in a few days in the hospital. Raphael perceived her hesitation and understood that words wouldn't be enough. He would need to prove it with actions. "Marianne," he said, "I know you have no reason to trust me. I know I've disappointed you countless times, but I swear by Helen that I will be different. Don't make promises you can't keep. Then let me show you instead of promising. The opportunity to show came sooner than expected. On the 5th day of hospitalization, Helen had a respiratory crisis during the night. Raphael was woken by the sound of the neonatal ICU alarms and saw a team of doctors and nurses rushing towards his daughter's incubator. Dr. Paul Harrison appeared minutes later to explain the situation. It's common. In premature babies, the respiratory system is still developing and sometimes they have difficulty. We're adjusting the oxygen support. Raphael and Marianne clung to the ICU window, watching the activity around Helen. It was a feeling of absolute helplessness, seeing their daughter fighting for her life and being able to do nothing but hope and wait. She'll be fine, Raphael murmured, more to convince himself than to reassure Marianne. How can you be sure? Because she's our daughter. She has your strength and my stubbornness. She won't give up. Marianne leaned on him, and for the first time since he arrived at the hospital, Raphael hugged her. It was a different embrace from those they had shared in the past. It wasn't romantic or carnal. It was one of mutual support, of partnership in the face of a crisis, of two people united by unconditional love for a third. The crisis lasted 4 hours. Helen responded well to treatment and returned to normal parameters, but the episode made it clear to Raphael how parenthood would be a constant emotional roller coaster. I was so scared, Marianne confessed when they finally returned to the room. Me too. It's different from what I imagined. This love for her it's physical. It hurts in my chest when she's not well. Raphael nodded. He was experiencing exactly the same thing. It was as if there was a direct link between his heart and Helen's well-being. When she was well, he felt at peace. When there were problems, an overwhelming anguish took over his body. I think that's how a family is built, he said, with these intense, shared experiences. During the second week, Raphael began to implement the changes he had promised. He called his secretary and instructed her to reorganize his schedule for the next 6 months. Meetings he previously considered indispensable were delegated or postponed. Business trips were cancelled. The corporate empire he had built would have to learn to function without his constant supervision. But Mr. Blackwood, protested Felicity, his secretary, you have a meeting with the Japanese investors next week. It's a £2 billion deal. Then send Marcus. He's vice president. It's time for him to take on more responsibility. But they specifically asked to speak with you. Felicity, I have a daughter in the neonatal ICU. If the Japanese can't understand that family comes first, they're not partners. I want to have. Hanging up that phone was one of the most liberating moments of Raphael's life. For the first time, he had chosen his personal priorities over financial interests. And surprisingly, instead of anxiety, he felt a profound relief. Marianne witnessed the phone conversation and couldn't hide her surprise. You just turned down £2 billion. I just chose what really matters. What if it goes wrong? What if you regret it later? It won't go wrong. And if it does, I'll deal with the consequences. But I won't miss important moments in our daughter's life because of money anymore. This declaration marked a fundamental shift in their dynamic. Marianne began to realize that Raphael was truly willing to transform, that fatherhood had awakened emotional capacities in him that she had always known existed. Helen continued to progress. On the 10th day, she managed to breathe on her own for a few hours. On the 15th, she opened her eyes for the first time and looked directly at Raphael when he spoke to her through the intercom. On the 20th day, she managed to suck a few milliliters of breast milk. Every small progress was celebrated as an epic victory. Raphael discovered that he cried easily now, out of relief, joy, pride in his warrior daughter. Marianne observed these transformations with a mixture of tenderness and cautious hope. You've changed, she said, during a walk in the hospital courtyard. How so? You cry. You show fear. You talk about feelings without seeming uncomfortable. Helen taught me that being vulnerable isn't being weak. How can a 1-month-old baby have taught you that? Because when I look at her, I can't pretend I'm in control. She shows me what really matters. Marianne stopped walking and faced him. Raphael, where? Are we? What are we now? It was the question they had both been avoiding for weeks. They were functioning as a team, supporting each other, sharing responsibility for Helen, but they hadn't talked about the future of their relationship. I'd like us to be a family, Raphael said. I don't know if you can forgive me for the last few months. I don't know if you can trust me again. But I want to try. It's not about forgiveness, Raphael. It's about guarantee. How can I be sure that you won't go back to being that cold man when the novelty wears off? You can't. I'm the one who has to prove every day that I've truly changed. What if Helen hadn't been born prematurely? If there hadn't been a crisis, would you have come back? Raphael considered the question honestly. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I needed a scare like that to understand what I was losing. So it wasn't love that brought you back. It was fear. It started as fear. Fear of losing both of you. But now it's love. Love that I can finally feel and express. Marianne nodded slowly. I need time. I need to see what you'll be like when we leave here, when life returns to normal. How much time do you need? I don't know. A few months, maybe a year. And during that time? During that time, we're co-parents. We take care of Helen together, but we live separately. You prove you've truly changed, and I relearn to trust. It was a sensible plan, though painful for Raphael. He wanted everything to go back to how it was immediately, but he understood that he had caused deep damage that couldn't be repaired in weeks. All right, he agreed, we'll do it your way. And Raphael? Yes? Thank you for coming back, for being here when we needed you. Thank you for giving me a second chance. Helen was discharged from the neonatal ICU after 6 weeks. She weighed 3 kilograms and could breathe, feed, and regulate her body temperature on her own. It was a discreet but deeply emotional celebration. Raphael held his daughter in his arms for the first time outside the incubator and felt that his life had acquired a completely new meaning. Marianne went to her apartment in Kensington, and Raphael bought a house in the same neighborhood 5 blocks away. It was a simple house with a garden, completely different from the modern and impersonal apartment where he lived before. He wanted a place where Helen could play, where she would feel welcomed whenever she visited him. The routine they established worked well. Raphael visited Helen every day, usually in the late afternoon after he resolved the most urgent company matters. On weekends, he stayed with her all day, bathing her, changing diapers, singing lullabies he invented on the spot. Marianne observed this transformation with growing admiration. Raphael had become the father she had always dreamed he could be, present, affectionate, totally dedicated to their daughter's well-being. But there was still a part of her that feared it was all temporary, that at some point he would return to his old priorities. The definitive test came 3 months after Helen's birth. The company was facing a serious financial crisis due to the changes Raphael had implemented. Some investors were threatening to withdraw their money. Employees were worried about job stability. Raphael had to make a decision: return to the old work regime to save the company, or maintain family priorities and risk a bigger crisis. He chose a third path. He sold 40% of the company to an international group, maintaining control but sharing operational responsibilities. It was a solution that made him lose money in the short term, but guaranteed that he could continue to be the father he wanted to be. When he told Marianne about the decision, she finally understood that the transformation was real and definitive. Raphael had chosen to give up part of his financial empire to preserve his new identity as a father and as a man. "You won't regret it?" she asked. "The only thing I regret is the time I lost with you both." That night, for the first time since Helen's birth, Marianne said she was ready to start over. The new beginning wasn't like in romantic movies. There were no dramatic declarations or nights of overwhelming passion. It was a gradual process, built on small but significant gestures, honest conversations, and trust that grew day by day. Raphael moved into the house in Kensington, this time with Marianne's blessing. They didn't move in together immediately. She kept her apartment as a kind of emotional safe haven, but they spent more and more time at his house, especially on weekends. The house had become a reflection of the new Raphael, where before the cold minimalism of his old apartment reigned, now there were toys scattered across the living room, photographs of Helen in every room, furniture designed for a family's comfort. The office, which once occupied most of the space, had been reduced to a discreet corner. The priority now was the spacious living room, the garden where Helen could play, the baby's room decorated with colorful characters. "Did you hire a decorator?" Marianne asked during one of her first visits. "No, I did it all myself. I researched, read magazines, visited stores. I wanted it to be personal." Marianne observed the details: the children's bookshelf, the mobile above the crib with small airplanes. Helen loved watching moving objects, the framed photos showing each milestone of the baby's development. "You photographed everything," she commented, flipping through an improvised album. "I don't want to miss any important moment." It was true. Raphael had become the most documentary father in the world. He photographed Helen sleeping, waking up, smiling, crying, discovering her own feet. He made videos of her trying to grab objects, babbling sounds he interpreted as attempts at communication, reacting to different songs. "Look," he said, showing his phone to Marianne. "Yesterday she laughed when I sang that song from Palabra Cantada. It wasn't just a reflex smile, it was a real laugh." Marianne smiled, seeing his enthusiasm. During their previous 5-year relationship, Raphael had never shown true excitement for anything that didn't involve numbers or professional achievements. Now, he vibrated with every small progress of Helen, as if it were the most important event in the universe. Raphael's company had stabilized after the sale of shares. The new corporate structure allowed him to maintain strategic control without being involved in daily operations. He came home before 6 in the evening every day, rarely worked on weekends, and when he needed to travel for work, which happened at most twice a month, he always returned the same day or at most stayed overnight for one night. "How is Marcus doing as vice president?" Marianne asked during dinner. "Better than I expected, maybe even better than me. He has a more collaborative vision. He can delegate without losing control. I'm learning a lot by observing his style. And don't you miss it? The adrenaline of big decisions, the power?" Raphael considered the question honestly. "I miss the adrenaline sometimes, but I discovered that watching Helen learn to roll over gives me a much greater emotional rush than closing a £100 million deal." "Really?" "Really, because business is predictable. You apply strategy, resources, time, and usually get the expected result. With Helen, every small achievement is a surprise. She teaches me new things about myself every day." Marianne was beginning to believe that the transformation was real and lasting. Raphael not only spoke differently, he acted differently. His priorities had changed, fundamentally, not just superficially. The first real test came when Helen was 6 months old. She developed a respiratory infection that, although not serious, required hospital admission for a week. Raphael cancelled a trip to Germany, where he would sign an important regional expansion contract. It was the second time he chose family over business, and this time he didn't even hesitate. "You didn't even think before cancelling," Marianne observed at the hospital. "There was nothing to think about. My place is here." "What if the Germans back out of the deal?" "Then they back out. There are other deals. There is only one Helen." During that week at the hospital, Raphael practically lived there. He slept in the chair next to the hospital crib, helped the nurses with care, learned to administer medications. When Helen cried during the night, he was the first to get up to comfort her. "You really became a father," Marianne said, watching him hum softly to calm their daughter. "I did, and it's the best thing I've ever been in my life." "Better than a millionaire businessman?" "Infinitely better." Marianne felt something definitively shift in her chest at that moment. She was watching Raphael hold Helen with infinite tenderness, whispering words of affection, completely focused on providing comfort to their daughter. It was the image of the man she had always dreamed he could become. Helen recovered completely from the infection, and they returned home with a renewed sense of partnership. Raphael had proven once again that his priorities were genuine, that family truly came first. It was around this time that Marianne decided to take the next step. "I want you to move in here," she said one night after they had put Helen to sleep. "Into the house? Really?" "Really, but with conditions." "What are they?" "First, no rush. You bring your things gradually, we share spaces gradually. Second, we maintain open communication about everything. If you're feeling pressured by work, tell me. If I'm afraid you'll go back to who you were before, I'll say something. Third, if it doesn't work out, you go back to your house without drama. We both know we gave it an honest chance. I accept all conditions." "Are you sure?" "The third might be the hardest." "I'm sure, and I won't need the third condition because it will work out." Raphael's move was gradual and organic. First came some clothes and toiletries, then his books. He had discovered the pleasure of literature and was reading English novels for the first time in his life. Next, his work equipment, a computer, a printer, some essential documents. Finally, the personal objects that truly mattered, photographs of his daughter, gifts Helen had given him, drawings made with her tiny hands in non-toxic paint, the first tiny shoe she had worn. "You've become sentimental," Marianne observed, watching him carefully organize these mementos on a shelf. "I've become a father," he corrected. "Fathers are sentimental." Adapting to domestics. Life revealed aspects of Raphael that Marianne had never seen. He discovered he liked to cook, especially baby food for Helen, which he prepared with meticulously researched organic ingredients. He revealed a talent for humming invented melodies that made the baby fall asleep quickly. He showed infinite patience for repetitive activities like assembling interlocking toys or reading the same story 12 times in a row. "You read The Ugly Duckling with the same concentration you use to read financial reports," Marianne said, watching him during story time. "It's more important," Raphael replied, adjusting Helen on his lap. "Financial reports don't teach about overcoming, acceptance, and discovering one's own identity." "You extracted all that from The Ugly Duckling?" "Helen extracted it. I'm just interpreting her reactions." Marianne laughed, but there was truth in Raphael's observation. He had developed an almost supernatural ability to interpret Helen's signals. He knew when she was hungry, sleepy, bored, or simply wanting attention. He understood what kind of music she preferred at each moment of the day, which toys interested her most, how to position her so she felt most comfortable. "How did you learn all this?" Marianne asked. "By observing, by paying attention. It's incredible how clearly babies communicate if you know how to listen." It was a skill Raphael had transferred from business to fatherhood. The same ability to read signals that made him an exceptional businessman now helped him be an intuitive father. 6 months after the move, Marianne realized that she had not only recovered the man she had fallen in love with, she had found a better version of him. Raphael maintained the intelligence and determination that had always attracted her, but now these qualities were tempered with tenderness, vulnerability, and a capacity for love she didn't know existed. "Do you know what else has changed about you?" she said one night after they had put Helen to sleep. "What?" "You've become present, truly present. When you're with me, you're entirely here. When you're with her, you don't think about anything else. Before, even when you were physically with us, your mind was always somewhere else. I learned that moments don't come back. You can rebuild businesses, you can regain money. But Helen's first smile, the first time she said Daddy, the first time she slept through the night, that only happens once. And when did she say Daddy? For the first time?" Raphael smiled with the kind of pride she had never seen in him before. "It was last week, when I was changing her diaper. It wasn't an indefinite papa that babies make. It was Daddy, clear, looking directly at me." "Did you cry?" "I cried, and I called everyone I know to tell them." "Including your mother?" Raphael hesitated. His relationship with his parents had become complicated since he became a father. Eleanor had visited Helen a few times, but always with the formal and distant demeanor that characterized her way of relating. She couldn't understand why Raphael had reduced his dedication to business because of a child. "My mother doesn't understand how Helen can be more interesting than a board meeting," Raphael said. "She thinks I'm going through a phase." "And are you?" "I am. A phase of being truly happy for the first time in my life." Raphael's answer touched the core of the issue Marianne had been avoiding addressing directly, their future as a couple, not just as co-parents. They were functioning perfectly as a family, but they hadn't officially redefined their romantic relationship. "Raphael," she said, "where do you think we're going?" "Wherever you want us to go." "It's not just my decision." "Then let's decide together. What do you want?" Marianne took a deep breath before answering. "I want to try again, for real this time. Not as a test or an experiment. I want to build a complete family." "Me too. But I need you to understand one thing. I don't want to go back to being the woman I was before, the one who waited for you to change, who accepted crumbs of attention, who was content to be priority number 3 or 4 in your life. If we're going to try again, it has to be as equals." "What do you mean?" "Your decisions about work, money, time affect our family, so I want to be part of them. Not as a subordinate, but as a partner. And I want my opinions about Helen's future to have the same weight as yours." Raphael nodded. During their months of living together, he had learned to value Marianne's perspective. Her observations about Helen were always spot on, her suggestions about routine and care always sensible. More than that, he had discovered that making decisions together was much more satisfying than commanding. "Everything alone. I accept, but I have one condition too." "What?" "I want to marry you." Marianne didn't expect that. "Marry?" "I want Helen to grow up in a legally constituted family. I want the world to know that you two are officially my priority. And I want—" Raphael paused, searching for the right words. "I want to be able to call you my wife. I want to have the official right to take care of you when you're sick, to make medical decisions if necessary, to be listed as your next of kin in all documents. Are you proposing, to me?" "I am." "Without a ring? Without kneeling? Without a prepared speech? With Helen sleeping in the next room? With you in your pajamas, after we spent the afternoon cleaning baby vomit off our shoulders?" Raphael smiled. "It's the most honest moment of our relationship. Why wouldn't it be the right moment for an honest proposal?" Marianne looked at the man in front of her. He wasn't the impeccable businessman she had known years before. He was a man with slightly disheveled hair, with a baby food stain on his shirt, tired but happy eyes. He was a father, a partner, a companion. He was the version of him she had always known existed. "Yes," she said, "I want to marry you." "Really?" "Really. But we'll do it our way. A small ceremony, focused on what really matters. Family, close friends, Helen as our flower girl. Helen can't even walk yet. Then she'll be carried. It will be perfect." They kissed right there, in the toy-strewn living room, with Helen sleeping in the next room and the washing machine running in the utility area. It was a different kiss from those they had exchanged in the past. It didn't have the urgency of young passion, nor the vague promise of an indefinite future. It was a kiss of certainty, of consolidated partnership, of mature and tested love. When they separated, Raphael whispered, "Thank you." "Why?" "For believing that I could change, for giving me the chance to be the man I always wanted to be but didn't know how." "Thank you," Marianne replied, "for having the courage to truly change." The wedding preparations were a natural extension of the new dynamic they had established. Everything was decided together, from the date, a Saturday in October when Helen would already be walking to the location, the function room of the building where Marianne worked, simply but elegantly decorated. Raphael surprised everyone by insisting that he wanted to write his own vows. "I've never talked about feelings in public," he explained to Marianne. "It's time to learn." "Are you sure? You don't have to do it if you don't feel comfortable." "I do. I want Helen to know, when she's older, that her father had the courage to speak publicly about how much he loves her mother." The ceremony took place on a sunny October afternoon. There were 50 guests, family, close friends, some of Marianne's colleagues, selected colleagues of Raphael. Helen, 1 year and 2 months old, staggered between the guests in a little white dress, eliciting smiles from everyone. When it was time for the vows, Raphael took a paper from his suit pocket, took a deep breath and began, "Marianne, when we met, I thought I knew everything about success. I had money, power, recognition, but I knew nothing about happiness. You tried to teach me for 5 years, and I resisted because I was afraid. Afraid to become vulnerable, afraid to need someone, afraid to love more than I was loved." Some people in the audience were already emotional. Raphael continued. "Then Helen arrived, and in a few seconds she destroyed all my defenses. When I saw our daughter fighting for her life, I understood that love is not weakness. It is the most powerful force in the world. It is what makes us brave enough to change, to grow, to be better than we thought we could be." Marianne was openly crying. Raphael folded the paper and concluded without reading, "I promise to be the husband you deserve and the father Helen deserves. I promise to choose you both every day in small decisions and big ones. I promise that when our daughter grows up, she will know what it is to be loved unconditionally because she saw the example of love between us." Marianne's vows were equally emotional. "Raphael, you taught me that people can truly change when they find a strong enough reason. You found 2 reasons, Helen and me. I promise to continue believing in your capacity to grow. I promise to be your partner in the adventures and challenges to come. And I promise that our family will always be a safe haven where you two can be exactly who you are." When they exchanged rings, Helen was in Marianne's lap, playing with the bouquet flowers, and completely oblivious to the fact that she was witnessing the moment her family became official. The party was simple but memorable. Raphael danced the waltz with Marianne holding Helen in her arms, creating one of the most beautiful images of the celebration. He gave a speech thanking everyone for their presence and, for the first time in public, spoke openly about how fatherhood had transformed his priorities and his understanding of what truly mattered in life. "Some of you must be thinking that this guy is not the Raphael Blackwood you know," he said, drawing laughter from the audience. "And you are right. This man here is an improved version, a version that learned that the greatest success is not measured in pounds but in smiles, that the greatest achievement is not in the pages of business magazines but in a child's first steps, that the greatest wealth is not in bank accounts but in having someone who loves you wake up beside you every day." When the party ended and they returned home, now officially as husband and wife, they put Helen to sleep and sat on the living room sofa, still in their wedding clothes but barefoot, exhausted but radiant. "How do you feel?" Marianne asked. "Complete," Raphael replied. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I am exactly where I should be. Even without the professional challenges from before, without the constant adrenaline. The adrenaline now is watching Helen discover the world, and the challenge is to be the husband and father you both deserve every day." Marianne snuggled into his shoulder. "I think we did it." "What?" "Build something real, something that will last." Raphael kissed the top of her head. "It's just the beginning. We have a whole life to build together." And for the first time since they met, both truly believed it. Married life brought a new dimension to Raphael and Marianne's relationship, not only because they now officially shared a surname and a bank account, but because the dynamic between them had matured in a way neither of them expected. Helen, at 18 months old, was in a phase of constant discoveries. Each day brought a new word, a new gesture, a new way of interpreting the world around her. It was a time of intense joys and equally intense challenges. Sleepless nights alternated with mornings of laughter, inexplicable tantrums contrasted with moments of absolute sweetness. "She's testing limits," Raphael explained to Marianne after a particularly difficult afternoon, when Helen had spent 2 hours refusing to eat anything but biscuits. "It's a sign of normal cognitive development." "Where did you read that?" Marianne asked, exhausted but amused by the academic seriousness her husband applied to raising their daughter. "In 3 different books on child development, and I confirmed it with 2 scientific articles." Raphael had become the most studious father possible. He read everything about pediatrics, child psychology, education. His office, once filled with financial reports and market graphs, now displayed an impressive collection of literature on responsive parenting. "Sometimes I think you dedicate more to understanding Helen than you did to understanding the financial market," Marianne observed. "I do. because she is infinitely more important and interesting than any market. This intellectual dedication to parenthood was a reflection of Raphael's personality. He had transferred his capacity for deep analysis and strategic planning to raising his daughter. Each developmental stage was studied in advance. Every possible problem was researched and prepared for. "You know there's no perfect manual for raising children, right?" Marianne said one night, watching him take notes on Helen's sleep patterns. "I know, but the more information I have, the better I can care for her. And the more you worry, the more anxious you'll become." Raphael stopped writing and looked at her. "Do you think I'm exaggerating?" "I think you're being yourself, only now it's directed towards Helen." "And is that bad?" "It's not bad. It's just different. Before, when you applied that intensity to business, I felt excluded. Now you're applying it to us and I feel included." It was a perceptive observation. Raphael had always been an obsessive person, but now the obsession was constructive and inclusive instead of isolating and competitive. Business, meanwhile, continued to prosper under the new structure he had created. Marcus, as operational vice president, had proven to be not only competent but innovative. The company was expanding sustainably, focusing on projects with positive social impact. "How is the affordable housing project in Birmingham going?" Marianne asked during dinner. "Better than expected. We delivered the first phase last week. 200 families who lived in high-risk areas now have their own homes with complete infrastructure." "Did you visit the site?" "I did. I took Helen with me." Raphael smiled. She loved seeing the children playing in the playground we built. This was another significant change in Raphael. Before, social projects were corporate obligations, marketing strategies, or ways to offset taxes. Now, he was personally involved, visiting the beneficiary communities, getting to know the families that would be helped. "Why this change?" Marianne asked. "Why do you now truly care about the social impact of your projects?" "Because now I understand what it's like to have something to lose. When I look at these families, I see that they want the same thing I want. A safe place to raise their children, opportunities for them to grow up with dignity." "And before you didn't think about that?" "Before I thought about numbers, how many units, what's the financial return, how to maximize profits. Now I think about people. What would it be like to raise Helen in a place without sanitation? What would it be like not to have resources to give her a quality education?" It was a transformation that went beyond individual fatherhood. Raphael was developing a social parenthood, a sense of responsibility towards all children who could be affected by his business decisions. This new perspective was also reflected in personal choices. The couple decided that Helen would be raised with social awareness from a young age. Instead of isolating her in a bubble of privilege, they wanted her to understand the diversity of British society early on. "Should we enroll her in a public school?" Marianne asked when they started discussing early childhood education. "I don't know. I want her to have the best education possible, but I also want her to interact with children from different backgrounds. What if we did something different? What if we looked for a private school that has a scholarship program for low-income children? That way, she would have educational quality and social diversity." "That's an interesting idea. I'll research it." Raphael's research extended for months. He visited dozens of schools, interviewed educational coordinators, analyzed curricula. He finally found an institution that combined academic excellence with genuine social commitment. Half of the students paid full tuition, the other half studied with scholarships funded by the former. "It's perfect," he told Marianne after the visit. "Helen will learn English with children who speak English at home and with children who speak English, Japanese, Arabic, Spanish. She'll make friends with children of doctors and children of cleaners." "And you think that will make her a better person?" "I think it will make her a more complete person, more like you." It was a sincere compliment. Raphael admired Marianne's ability to relate naturally with people from all backgrounds, her complete absence of prejudice, her ease in finding common ground with anyone. "You've changed in that aspect too," Marianne observed. "Before you only associated with people of your socio-economic level." "Because I was insecure. I was afraid that people different from me would discover that I wasn't as special as I pretended to be." "And now?" Now I know I'm special to the right people, and that's enough. The right people evidently were Marianne and Helen, but the circle had expanded to include Marianne's colleagues at the hospital, the company employees he now treated as integral individuals rather than just human resources, the neighbors in the neighborhood where they lived. The house in Kensington had become an informal meeting point. Marianne liked to host friends for weekend lunches, and Raphael discovered he liked to cook for groups. His Sunday barbecues became a tradition among the staff at the hospital where Marianne worked. "You've become sociable," Dr. Paul Harrison commented during one of these gatherings. "I've become human," Raphael corrected. "Before I was a money-making machine pretending to be a person." "And don't you miss it? The simplicity of when everything was just about work?" Raphael looked around. Marianne was in the pool with Helen, teaching her not to be afraid of the water. Some friends chatted at the garden table. Others helped in the kitchen. There were children's laughs, overlapping conversations, the organized chaos of people who feel at ease. "I miss the simplicity sometimes," he admitted. "But I wouldn't trade this rich complexity for that empty simplicity." It was a profound reflection for a Sunday afternoon, but it well illustrated the journey Raphael had taken. His life was now objectively more complicated. There were more people to consider, more emotional responsibilities, more variables outside his control. But it was a complication that brought satisfaction, not stress. Their first wedding anniversary arrived in October, at a time when Helen was going through a particularly challenging phase. At 2 years old, she had discovered the word no and used it as an answer to everything, from "Do you want a bath?" to "Do you want ice cream?" "How are we going to celebrate?" Marianne asked. "Romantic dinner, weekend trip?" "How about we stay home and order Japanese food? We put Helen to sleep early and talk about how this first year has been. Don't you want something more special?" "Marianne, 2 years ago, I would have thought a special celebration had to involve an expensive restaurant and imported champagne. Today I think a special celebration is being able to talk to you without interruption for 2 hours. They did exactly that. They ordered sushi, lit candles in the living room after Helen fell asleep, and spent the night reminiscing about the past 12 months. "What was the most difficult moment?" Marianne asked. "When Helen was hospitalized with pneumonia in July, I had never felt so much fear in my life." "And the happiest moment?" Raphael considered. "There are so many. But I think it was when she called me Daddy for the first time consciously, knowing exactly what it meant." "When was that?" "Last month. She was crying because you had gone to work and I was trying to console her. Suddenly she stopped crying, looked me in the eyes and said, 'Daddy here, it's okay.' As if she had realized that, even without her mother, she was safe because she had her father." Marianne smiled. "She knows she can count on you." "And you? Do you know you can count on me?" "I do. But it's funny. Before I wanted you to depend more on me. Now I depend more on you, and that doesn't bother me." "How so?" "Before, when you were too independent, I felt like I wasn't necessary in your life. Now when I see how present you are for Helen and for me, I understand that interdependence is different from dependence. We complete each other, but neither of us loses individuality." It was a sophisticated observation about the evolution of their relationship. Raphael had learned to need Marianne without becoming dependent on her, and Marianne had learned to trust Raphael without losing her autonomy. "What's your plan for the next few years?" Raphael asked. "Professionally, I want to specialize in neonatal pediatrics, work with premature babies like Helen was. Personally, I want us to have more children when Helen is a little older." "More children? Don't you want to?" Raphael smiled. "I do. In fact, I've been thinking about it for a few months. Helen would be an amazing big sister." "And you? What are your plans?" "I want to expand the company's social projects. I'm thinking of creating a foundation focused on housing and education for low-income families. And personally—" Raphael hesitated. "What?" "I want to write a book." "A book?" Marianne was genuinely surprised. "About what?" "About fatherhood. About how being a father changed my perspective on success, relationships, purpose in life. Not a self-help manual, but an honest reflection on personal transformation." Would you write about our story? I would write about my story. About how I almost lost the most important things in life by being obsessed with things that didn't matter. Marianne was silent for a few minutes, processing the idea. Would you be willing to expose your vulnerability publicly? I would. If it can help other men understand that change is possible, that it's worth it. Would it be a personal project or a company one? Totally. Personal. And if it generates any money, I'll direct it to the foundation I want to create. It was further evidence of how fundamentally Raphael had changed. The man who once obsessively protected his public image was now willing to share his flaws and weaknesses if it could have a positive impact. Can I read it while you're writing? I need your opinion. You know better than anyone who I was and who I became. What if I think you're romanticizing the transformation too much, or being too hard on yourself? Then you help me find the right tone. I want it to be honest, but not self-indulgent. The conversation extended late into the night. When they finally went to sleep, both had the feeling that the first year of marriage had been not an end, but a beginning. They had laid the foundations for something lasting and meaningful. The following month, Raphael began working on the book. He wrote on Saturday mornings when Helen slept in and Marianne took the opportunity to exercise at the building's gym. These were 2 hours a week of total concentration, during which he tried to translate into words the emotional journey he had taken. The first chapters were difficult. Raphael discovered that writing about feelings was infinitely more complex than writing corporate reports. There were no objective metrics to measure personal transformation, no graphs to illustrate emotional growth. Is it difficult? Marianne asked after a morning when he spent longer than usual at the computer. Very much so. I'm trying to explain what it's like to discover that you spent 38 years being an incomplete version of yourself. And what is it like? It's like discovering you're colorblind after decades of thinking you saw all colors. Suddenly you understand why certain things didn't make sense, why certain experiences seemed empty. Marianne nodded. It was a metaphor that made sense. And what made you see the colors? You too. But mainly Helen. Because with you I could still pretend everything was fine. With a baby, there's no pretending anything. The book took shape over the months. Raphael wrote about his emotionally arid childhood, about building a personality based on external achievements, about his relationship with Marianne and the mistakes he made, but mainly about fatherhood as a catalyst for change. Can I read the chapter about our relationship before you finalize it? Marianne asked. Of course, but you might be upset by some things I wrote. For example, I wrote that our previous relationship was asymmetrical, that you were emotionally available and I was emotionally absent, that you gave more than you received. And isn't that true? It's true. But it might hurt to read. Marianne read the chapter that night after they put Helen to sleep. Raphael was anxious, observing her reactions, trying to interpret every expression. So? He asked when she finished. It's honest. Some parts do hurt, but not because you were unfair. They hurt because they are true. Do you want me to change anything? No, I think men going through the same situation need to read this exactly as it is. They need to understand that real transformation requires honest recognition of mistakes. And do you think the book can really help people? I think so, especially because you're not selling a magic formula. You're showing a real process with relapses, fears, difficulties. Marianne's encouragement was fundamental for Raphael to continue writing. In the following months, the project became a kind of therapy. Putting the entire emotional journey on paper helped him better understand his own transformation. Helen, meanwhile, continued to grow and surprise them. At 2.5 years old, she already spoke complete sentences and demonstrated a strong and affectionate personality. She had her father's determination and her mother's empathy. She's going to be a leader, Raphael observed one night after seeing her meticulously organizing her toys. She's going to be herself, Marianne corrected, and we're going to support whoever she chooses to be. Even if she chooses to be an entrepreneur like me. Even if she chooses to be an astronaut, a firefighter, or decides she wants to live in a cabin in the countryside planting tomatoes. Raphael smiled. Organic tomatoes, I hope. Evidently. It was a typical conversation for them now, affectionate speculations about their daughter's future, but always with the care not to create rigid expectations. Both had learned how parental expectations could be detrimental to children's development. The year was ending when Raphael received an unexpected proposal. A group of American investors wanted to buy his company for an amount that would triple his personal wealth. It was an irresistible offer from a financial point of view. "And what do you want to do?" Marianne asked when he told her about the proposal. "I'm still processing it. It's a lot of money, but it would also mean losing control over the company, over the social projects, over the direction you've been giving the business." "Exactly. And what's more important to you now, the money or control over the social impact?" Raphael reflected for a few days before giving a definitive answer. He talked to Marcus, analyzed the implications, researched the history of the potential buyers. In the end, the decision was surprisingly easy. "I'm going to decline the offer," he announced during dinner. "Why?" "Because I discovered something interesting about myself. I don't want to be extremely rich. I want to have enough money to provide a good life for my family and to fund social projects. But I don't want the responsibility or the complications of excessive fortune." "Since when don't you want to be extremely rich?" "Since I realized that extreme wealth can isolate people from reality. I want Helen to grow up with privileges, but also with social awareness. If I accept this offer, she will grow up in a reality so distant from most people that she might develop a distorted view of the world." It was a mature reflection on the impact of wealth on children's upbringing. Raphael had come to the conclusion that enough money was better than too much money. "And you won't regret it?" "I won't, because I discovered that my definition of success has changed. Success now is Helen growing up balanced, you achieving professional fulfillment, and me having a positive social impact through business." Marianne kissed his face. "I'm proud of the man you've become. I'm proud of who we've become." It was true they had built something solid, based on shared values, mutual respect, and mature love. The year that was ending had consolidated Raphael's transformation and Marianne's trust. They were ready for the challenges and joys that the future held. The following 6 months were a slow and deliberate reconstruction. Raphael slept in the guest room for 10 weeks, until one night Marianne knocked on the door and said, "I think I'm ready to share the bed again, but I'm not ready for physical intimacy yet." Raphael completely respected her pace. They began sleeping side by side again, but maintaining distance. Gradually that distance lessened. First they woke up holding hands after a night when Raphael comforted Marianne during a nightmare. Then Marianne snuggled into his chest on a cold July morning. Small gestures that signaled the gradual return of trust. The total transparency Marianne had demanded proved transformative for both. Raphael shared his real-time location, showed all messages he received, and reported every work meeting. At first he felt monitored, but he soon realized that complete openness freed him from the anxiety of hiding anything. Marianne, in turn, also adopted the same transparency. She showed messages from artist colleagues, reported conversations with gallery owners, and shared her creative insecurities. They became a couple without secrets, an experience neither of them had ever had before. Sessions with Dr. Leonard continued fortnightly. The psychologist helped them navigate difficult moments when Marianne was overcome by sudden waves of anger or when Raphael felt excessively guilty. Gradually they learned that healing was not linear. There were good days and bad days, but the overall trajectory was one of growth. "Trust is not something that is rebuilt all at once," Dr. Leonard explained in a session. "It's like a muscle that has been injured. It needs gradual and consistent exercise to return to normal function." Their exercise was radical. Honesty in everyday situations. When Raphael felt attracted to a woman on the street, he told Marianne. When Marianne felt insecure about something he did, she verbalized it immediately, instead of keeping it to herself. It was uncomfortable at first, but it created an emotional intimacy they had never experienced. 3 months after the confession, Raphael made an important decision. He came home one Thursday with a proposal. "Marianne, I want to renew our vows." She was painting in the studio and stopped with the brush in the air. "Why?" Because when we married 7 years ago, we were different people. I was a man who thought love just meant not cheating and paying the bills. You were a woman who accepted crumbs of attention, thinking that was all you deserved. Raphael approached the easel. Now we are different people. I learned that love is a daily choice, constant work, conscious vulnerability. You learned that you deserve to be a priority, not just a convenient responsibility. Marianne put the brush aside and looked at him. And why do you think that requires a ceremony? Because I want to make specific promises to the person you are today, not to the person you were 7 years ago. And I want to hear your vows to the man I have become, not to the man I was. The idea intrigued Marianne. They had changed so much in recent months that they truly seemed like different people from those who married in the small ceremony in Cornwall. What would it be like? A small ceremony, just us and a few important people, on the beach where we met. With vows we write specifically for who we are now. Marianne thought for a few minutes. I want one condition. What? I want it to be exactly 1 year after your confession. To mark that, we managed to survive the worst and consciously chose to stay together. Raphael smiled. Perfect. The next few months were spent preparing not only for the ceremony, but for the life they wanted to build together. Raphael sold one of his companies and began working only 6 hours a day, dedicating more time to Marianne and to himself. He started practicing yoga, reading literature, learning about art. He discovered passions he had buried under years of obsessive focus on work. Marianne secured her solo exhibition in one of Brighton's most prestigious cultural spaces. The show, titled Metamorphosis, brought together works from the past 2 years, from the dark paintings of the crisis period to the colorful works of reconciliation. Critics praised the evident emotional evolution on the canvases and the artistic journey of a woman who found her voice. At the opening of the exhibition, Raphael stood beside Marianne, genuinely proud. He talked to critics about her techniques, asked intelligent questions about composition, and showed real interest in his wife's work. Marianne watched him, surprised and satisfied. It was the first time he had truly engaged with her art. He really has changed, commented Chloe, an artist friend of Marianne's. It seems he finally understood he married an artist, not a decorator. The vow renewal ceremony took place on a golden December afternoon on Brighton Beach, the same place where they had met at the vernissage 7 years earlier. Only 12 people were present, both their parents, a few close friends, Dr. Leonard and his wife. Marianne wore a simple white dress of fluid fabric that danced with the sea breeze. Raphael wore a light linen suit without a tie. They stood on the sand facing the sea as the sun began to set. Raphael spoke first. Marianne, 7 years ago I promised to love you in joy and sorrow, in sickness and in health, in richness and in poverty. They were beautiful promises, but empty, because I didn't understand what they meant. He looked into her eyes. Today I promise different and specific things. I promise to ask you how you are feeling and truly listen to the answer. I promise to share my fears and insecurities with you, not just my successes. I promise to value your art not for what it's worth, but for what it means to you. Raphael paused, visibly emotional. I promise never again to take our love for granted. I promise to choose you every day, consciously, even when it's difficult. And I promise that if one day I can't keep these promises, I will seek help instead of running away. Marianne wiped away her tears before beginning her vows. Raphael, 7 years ago I promised to be your faithful and dedicated wife. But in truth, I promised to be invisible, convenient, a shadow that wouldn't hinder your important life. She held his hands. Today I promise different things. Promise to demand the place I deserve in your life and in our life. I promise to express my needs instead of waiting for you to guess them. I promise not to accept crumbs of love, pretending it's a feast. Marianne smiled through her tears. I promise to forgive your mistakes, but not to forget your lessons. I promise to grow by your side instead of just existing. And I promise that if one day I can't keep these promises, I will tell the truth instead of pretending everything is fine. Dr. Leonard, who informally officiated the ceremony, declared them remarried in conscious love. They kissed as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in orange and pink hues. The party after the ceremony was small but intense. It took place in the same hotel where they had had their first encounter. Raphael's parents, initially skeptical about this nonsense of renewing vows, were moved to realize their son's genuine transformation. Marianne's mother, who had spent years worried about her daughter's apparent unhappiness, finally saw her truly radiant. "You look like a couple of young lovers," Marianne's father commented during the toast. "That's exactly how we feel," Marianne replied, "as if we were just starting now, but with the wisdom of those who have already weathered storms." 6 months after the vow renewal, Marianne discovered she was pregnant. The news arrived on a Saturday morning when she woke up nauseous for the 3rd time that week. The home pregnancy test confirmed what both suspected but dared not verbalize. "Are we ready for this?" Marianne asked, looking at the 2 lines on the test. "I don't know if anyone is truly ready," Raphael replied, "but we are prepared. We are a team now, for real." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Raphael accompanied Marianne to all medical appointments, set up the baby's room, and participated in childbirth preparation classes. It was a paternal and caring side of him that Marianne was experiencing for the first time. "You're going to be an incredible father," she said one afternoon as they felt the baby kick. "How do you know?" "Because you learn to pay attention, and attention is the foundation of everything that matters in love." During the last months of pregnancy, Raphael further reduced his workload. He delegated the operational administration of the company to a trusted partner and kept only the main strategic decisions. He wanted to be completely present for the birth of their child and for the first months of life. "Won't you miss the adrenaline of business?" Marianne asked. "The adrenaline is different now. It's seeing you pregnant with our child. It's imagining what it will be like to teach him about the world. It's thinking about all the moments we'll live together as a family." Their daughter was born on a sunny September morning. Sophia Helen Miller came into the world after an 8-hour labor, with Raphael holding Marianne's hand and whispering words of encouragement throughout the process. When the doctor placed Sophia in Marianne's arms, Raphael cried as he had never cried in his adult life, not from sadness or frustration, but from a joy so pure and overwhelming that it overflowed from his eyes. "She's perfect," Marianne murmured, observing her daughter's dark eyes, which stared back with intense curiosity. "You two are perfect," Raphael said, kissing Marianne's forehead and then delicately touching Sophia's face. The first few months with Sophia were intense but revealing. Raphael proved to be a present and dedicated father, waking up for night feedings, changing diapers, carrying their daughter for hours when she was restless. Marianne, in turn, discovered a maternal strength she didn't know she possessed and a capacity for multitasking that surprised her. "How did we do it before she existed?" Marianne asked one night, watching Sophia sleep in the crib beside their bed. "I don't even remember," Raphael replied. "It feels like she's always been here." Dr. Leonard visited them when Sophia was 2 months old. He had become a family friend, not just the psychologist who had saved their marriage. "How are you coping with the changes?" he asked. "We discovered that we are stronger as a couple than we imagined," Marianne replied. "Sophia is uniting us even more." "And you, Raphael, how is fatherhood?" "It's scary and wonderful at the same time. I look at her and feel a gigantic responsibility, but also a motivation I've never felt before. I want to be the man she deserves to have as a father." "What kind of man is that?" Raphael thought before answering. "A man who demonstrates love through presence, not just provision. A man who shows her how a woman should be treated by the way I treat Marianne. A man who admits mistakes and apologizes when necessary." Dr. Leonard smiled. "You've come a long way since that first session." "Doctor," Marianne said, "can I make a confession? In that first session, I was 80% sure we were going to separate. And now? Now I'm 100% sure we're going to be together forever. Not because we won't have more problems, but because we've learned how to deal with them together." Raphael agreed. "We learned that marriage is not a permanent state that is achieved. It's a daily job that we choose to do, because it's worth it." When Sophia was 6 months old, Marianne resumed painting. She set up a smaller studio inside her daughter's room, where she could work while the girl played or slept. Her new works explored themes of motherhood, family, mature love. A gallery in London invited her for a collective exhibition on women, artists, and motherhood. "Will you accept?" Raphael asked. "I want to accept, but I'm afraid to leave Sophia." "We'll go together. I insist on getting to know London through your artist's eyes." It was the kind of support Marianne had always dreamed of having. Raphael not only agreed with her career, but actively participated, offering logistical and emotional support. The trip to London was a success. Sophia behaved perfectly during the flight, the exhibition was well received by critics, and Raphael proved to be an excellent travel companion. They took the opportunity to have a romantic weekend, with Sophia being cared for by her maternal grandparents in Brighton. "Do you know what impresses me most about our story?" Marianne said, while dining at a charming restaurant in Shoreditch. "What?" "It wasn't love at first sight that saved us. It was work, conscious, consistent, daily work." Raphael held her hand across the table. "And do you think that's better or worse than love at first sight?" "Better, much better, because what we built was chosen, not just felt, and choices can be renewed every day." On their return to Brighton, they made a stop at the Cornwall beach where they had originally married. Sophia played in the sand while they watched the sea. "Remember when you told me you wanted to exhibit at the National Gallery?" Raphael asked. "I remember." "Still want to?" "Of course." Raphael smiled. "I have a contact there, a collector who finances exhibitions. Do you want me to present your work?" Marianne looked at him surprised. "Would you do that?" "Marianne, I will spend the rest of my life trying to compensate for the years I didn't adequately support your dreams." "You don't need to compensate for anything. You are already the husband I always wanted to have." "Then I'll be the husband you deserve to continue having." They kissed right there on the sand, with Sophia giggling beside them as if approving the moment. 2 years later, Marianne indeed had her solo exhibition at the National Gallery. The show was called Maturation and brought together works from different phases of her career. The catalogue included a text where she wrote about art as a mirror of personal evolution and life as infinite inspiration for creation. At the opening of the exhibition, Raphael circulated through the museum carrying Sophia, now a talkative and curious child, explaining to her about the colors and shapes her mommy had created. "Daddy, why does mommy paint faceless people?" Sophia asked about a work from the darker period. "Because sometimes when we're sad, we feel like we've lost our identity. But see these other paintings here?" Raphael pointed to the more recent works. "These have very defined faces. Do you know why?" "No." "Because when we find true love, we discover who we truly are." Marianne approached them. "Are you giving our daughter an art lesson?" "He's giving a life lesson," Raphael corrected. That night, after Sophia was asleep, Raphael and Marianne sat on the balcony of the new apartment they had bought, smaller than the previous one, but with a view of the beach and a perfect studio for Marianne. 3 years ago, I was ready to file for divorce," Marianne said. 3 years ago, I was a man who thought love was just a commodity to be managed. And now I know that love is the only thing that truly matters in life, and that it's worth any work necessary to maintain it." Marianne snuggled into his chest. "Do you know what the most incredible part of our whole story is?" "What?" "It's that we didn't end up the same as when we started. We ended up better, more whole, more true." Raphael kissed the top of her head. "And with a beautiful daughter who will grow up seeing what a truly healthy relationship is like. She will never accept less than she deserves, never, because she will have examples of what is possible when two people decide to truly know each other and love consciously." In the next room, Sophia slept peacefully, surrounded by a love that had been tested by time, by crises, by mistakes, and by the courage to start anew. A love that was not born ready, but was built brick by brick, day after day, choice after choice. And as the sea whispered outside the window, Raphael and Marianne remained there, embraced, knowing that they had found not only each other, but their best versions through each other, knowing that true love is not one that never faces storms, but one that learns to dance in the rain and finds the sun on the other side.